interesting contribution. And there is this wonderful field of semiotics and biosemiotics, which is full of all kinds of nonsense. So anyway, that's for another time. What I'd like to do is continue from where I left off last week, really. I said my main theme last week was about organizational psychology, what happens inside organizations, lessons we can learn about how to run them effectively. And I quoted from Elliot Jacks, as you see on this particular slide. I showed this last week. Elliot Jacks points out there are at least 4 different concepts of organization: the manifest or published organizational chart version, which you can see on a manager's wall; the assumed or the reality of the organization that people believe exists, and of course everyone will have their own what the organization of which they see themselves as being a part; and the extent of the form of the organization as it actually is upon investigation. If you go in there as some kind of consultant or cultural anthropologist, you find all sorts of things which are not manifest or assumed. And then it's requisite. This is Jack's term, requisite organization, the form of the organization that it would be in if it matched up with the reality of things as it was In other words, the organization that it ought to be, how the organization ought to be if it was working effectively. And he's been developing his ideas about requisite organization for, well, he developed for about 50 years at least. Anyway, I just want to summarize a couple of his points, which I think are certainly relevant to how we understand organizations like hospitals and other organizations, and nation states come to that. So I'm going to the next slide, I hope. Yes. Now, Jacks makes a distinction between 2 types of organization, and he claims that he's taking a scientific approach. He's being clear with his terminology, he's defining his concepts, and he prefaces this by pointing out how much confusion there is in language, the labels that people use for different aspects of organization, manager, worker, blah, 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 work itself. So he makes a distinction between associations and managerial accountable hierarchies, MAHs. Associations, he says, are formed by members, like partnerships in some kind of business organization, including shareholders and so on. Churches where the membership kind of own the organization, which is certainly true of Congregationalists, and where even in the big organized churches, the priests are part of it. They're all members of it by virtue of their status, rather than being employed as such. Same with nations, the governments, all citizens are participants, members of the association, and we together elect the government and so on. Trades unions similarly are associations. These are some examples. It also includes medical associations and associations of academics in universities where tenured professors basically have the kind of ownership of the association, or they are the association. Now it's the association that decides to employ people to get work done. This is the critical distinction. So the association will have an elected governing body with a chairman of the board. Okay, in business organizations with responsibilities to shareholders and so on, and they have these meetings about the board and the company as a whole. Now, what Jacks is particularly interested in is the managerial accountable hierarchies, which are organized to get work done. He claims it's a universally applicable concept, and he mentions administrations, factories, armies, and so on. And these are organizations which are managed by a chief executive officer who has managerial responsibility. And I did mention last week some of what he means by accountability, but I'll go on. Essentially, it says that within one of these hierarchies that whoever has responsibility for subordinates should have the right to hire and fire. Everyone's an employee of the association and so on. I won't go into too much detail because I haven't got the time. It gives a brief history of MHAs. It says pre-industrially, MHAs, these managerial organisations, were used for civil and church administration and for armies. things like that. He goes so far as to say everyone else was he also says it all began, the first to do this in a structured way were the Chinese with their administrative structures more than 3,000 years ago, but that's another story. His history isn't that accurate. He also says pre-industrially, apart from that, everyone else was self-employed as a farmer or a tradesperson of some sort, or they were a family's household servant. Now, what he cheerfully manages to miss out in that history, it's not important to his thesis, but he manages to miss out other people's concept of feudal societies where 90% of the population are bonded serfs, slaves, or peasants who are basically in bondage. But that's another story. But what he's saying here is post-industrial, these management MHAs, anyway, it's MAH. I've done it wrong. MAHs, aren't they? Management. I've put the wrong acronym there. Never mind. These management accountable hierarchies are ubiquitous. Okay, this is with industrialization from the 19th century onwards. They've just spread and spread and spread. And he said in developed nations, up to 90% of the working population are employed by MAHs. That's it. They're on wages and they're on salaries and so on. So that's his big distinction between MHAs and associations. And basically that's it. And it's a bit of a tangle when you let me get rid of those slides. It's a bit of a tangle when you get to how hospitals are organised, where you do have at least three hierarchies at work: the administrative, the nursing, and the medical, and the medical and nursing may be sub-organised into associations. It depends. I mean, there's a lot of variety in there. But I thought this concept of the management accountability hierarchy was an interesting way to look at the world we live in. And he would obviously go to the nation state, include that the government employee, that the civil service constitute the management accountability hierarchy. They're the ones employed to get work done. Thank you.